All right. Hello, folks. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are around the world. Hopefully, you can hear us. Hopefully, you can see us. This is our first ever time we've actually tried to do this. Actually, that's not quite true. We've tried to do this before. When I had to grab my bags in America and come home because of the whole COVID pandemic over a year ago now, we were sort of rushing to get back home. And I tried to do this on Facebook Live and tried to bring John Mackay in, but we spent the whole time just sort of on the phone saying, hello, this is a test. So hopefully this is working and hopefully you can see us all. I'm Indiana Joe. I'm the Director of Creation Research UK. And with us today as well, we've got our International Director, John Mackay. Hello, John.
G'day, mate. And whilst we've done plenty of Zoom, this is a new experience for us to get this to actually work.
Hopefully, if this works, we're going to be able to do this more often, going out on both YouTube and Facebook. And it's great to have social media platforms like that, which we can sort of use. And our topic that we're going to sort of be briefly chatting about today, John, is climate change. And it's quite funny. When I scheduled this meeting to sort of go ahead, and it automatically shared it to Facebook. And I'd said, join John Mackay and Joseph Hubbard in conversation about climate change. And Facebook had a little sort of banner come up, which just said, click on here to find out the latest climate trends for your area. So would you say that this is really a very hot topic right now?
It's hot and cold because Texas has been under feet of snow and Australia has been pretty warm. And the big disadvantage, the people who are climate change pushes, which is now, you will have noticed since COVID is sort of eased out of the news, global warming is back. So it's a prime tune, a great time to actually be talking about this, because the media is trying to get people hooked on another fear politics run.
Well, it's interesting, just going back in local news, something that I know both you and I have noticed is when I was just a wee boy and was growing up, and everything was about global warming. It was global warming, global warming. But in recent years, the sort of shift has been mostly away from global warming and into what they call climate change. It's shifted away from a specific type of climate change, and it's now just sort of generally called climate change, which we can talk about in a moment. But what both you and I have noticed is in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of this global warming coming back up. And especially in the midst of all this cold that we've been having, like Texas has been under snow and unheard of sort of temperatures. And even here in the UK, just a couple of weeks back, we actually had part of the Thames River freeze over, which is not unheard of because they used to have frost fairs in the Victorian times and before then, and the whole Thames used to freeze over and they used to have a fair and everything on it, but it's not happened in many years now, and yet after this Thames has frozen over. So they're definitely trying to make sure that we understand that this is a global warming thing going on here. It would seem
they're actually saying global warming is causing the freezing in Texas. And to the ordinary person, that doesn't make the slightest sense at all. Global warming is going to make the Gulf Stream shift. This will make the seas higher on the left-hand side of the Atlantic. And I'm old enough to remember when we just had climate and weather. Climate was what you wanted, weather was what you got. And now you are back. We've got rid of the COVID menace according to all the vaccine pushes. So time to put media concentration on the global warming emphasis, but it's always been there behind the scenes. Climate change was just a massage over a very unpopular topic because you couldn't push the figures as far as they wanted. But yes, it is certainly back in the news. It is certainly an important time to release our new programs on this subject.
Yeah, because it's really going to be a hot topic this year. I mean, just in the UK alone, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, has announced that they've got the G7 summit coming up. They've got the climate summit coming up, which is going to happen down in Cornwall and in Scotland. So we're hosting two major political meetings, if you like, or political summits. And the main agenda of an entire one of those is climate change. And certainly in the World Leaders Summit, it's going to be a big hot topic, especially with Biden now obviously in charge of America, and that's one of his big policies that he's pushing is climate change. I know that it's still big over in Australia, so I think we're going to need to have to do a few webinars or live videos or something about this as we go forward, John. But you mentioned our new programs. We do have a brand new program out. called Fire and Ice. I think we're sort of all ready to go with that. I mean, you've watched it, John. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's a really important reminder that history is a far better weather map than the computer modeling, because we've been there, we've done that, we actually wrote it down. So when you go to Iceland, it reminded me of the fact that, you know, the Vikings were there 800, 900 years ago. They wrote down what happened and they left the evidence behind. When
Mm.
I go to England and I look at the old churches and I notice, hey, some of these have no fireplaces. It can't have been as freezing cold as it was when I preached in York Cathedral and froze to death.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so in reality, what you'll find is the history that we're looking at in this new documentary. As you go to Iceland, you may remember I found it when you were going for your honeymoon, by the way. I said, Joseph, there's lots of pictures I'd love you to get. And you've done that, but gone even further
Yeah.
and recorded the evidence that the Vikings left of what the climate was like. So take it from there. Tell us some of the things you found.
Yeah, well, it was really quite fun actually because I mean we got married, me and my wife Sarah, and we got married sort of just in the it was really in the midst of all the COVID stuff. We'd just come out of the first lockdown and it was opening up, and we actually ended up getting married. People in the UK will know the relevance of this, but we just got married just 3 days before the rule of six came into place. So when the infections began to spike again, they sort of cut it all down so only 6 people could gather together. So we only just slipped our very small wedding in there just in time. But of course, most international travel was
Married,
down.
yeah, didn't you? I believe you
Say
got
again,
married.
sorry.
I believe you got married twice.
Yeah, yes, we did. Technically, we did. We actually had to. We ended up doing a registry office in the morning, and then having the sort of the biblical ceremony in the afternoon in a marquee in the garden. So it was quite a fun day. But we were sort of thinking, well, what do we do about honeymoon? You know, because we wanted to travel Europe, and we'd sort of been planning and stuff, but didn't really get to do that, obviously, with all the lockdowns. So it was actually my mother-in-law who suggested going to Iceland because she had visited back there in the past and it was a great place, and they had a great system going where you had to take a COVID test on arrival and only had to isolate for a few days, and then you were basically let out free to do what you wanted. And it was really quiet there as well because there was hardly any tourists, you know, just able to go and explore and basically do what you want. So my wife thought it was a honeymoon. I thought it, just like you, it was a great opportunity to do some research and spend some time. And you are absolutely right. When we first arrived there, I really didn't have much of an idea of what we were going to do. I thought perhaps we'd do a few live videos, and we did do a few live videos. You can find them back on our Facebook. I thought perhaps we could do, you know, a few little photographs and reports. And then as we started traveling around and started finding out more about the history there, as well as seeing the real life evidence for climate change right in front of you, we thought, hey, we actually need to start documenting this. We need to start filming this. And then that led to a 10-hour round trip to go and try and find some fossils. And then that led to traveling to the other side of the island to be able to take some footage on an actual glacier. And then that led to sort of matching it up with the history records that we have here in the UK. And hey, it even ended up going across to Australia, didn't it?
It did, because when I grew up, and you've got to admit, Joseph, I'm a little bit more mature than you now. I began to experience what it's like to have that 70, as the old King James Bible says, because the Bible's got a lot to say about climate, but I didn't know about it when I was young, right? I wasn't brought up in a church family at all,
Yeah.
but I did know weather. And what struck me was when I was 5 or 6, I remember a distinct cycle of rain coming, and I loved it because we lived in a house with an old tin roof, and then it dried up. And for quite a few years, we had no rain on the roof at all. Then, when I was 14 or so, it happened again. And I thought, okay, now I've got a pretty good memory. Will it happen again when I'm 21 or whatever? And it did. And I began to realize, and this is before climate was even an issue, that it seems to come in cycles.
Mm.
Now, by the time I'm at university, climate change is a long way in the future, but the geologists are saying up, down, up, down, up, down. And one of the ups was an explanation of all the red soil we have in Australia. Now, I've taken you to Australia, and we've gone from one end to the other following red soil, because the red soil, the geology professor was saying, is an indication of hot, wet weather, and it's not hot and wet now.
No.
So he would point to several cycles and say, it's been hot, it's been cold. It's been hot, it's been cold. And our biggest skeptic of, say, the creationist movement, Professor Ian Plimer, who's a geologist, does a great job on climate, because he's got to say, here's the evidence, hot, cold, hot, cold.
Let me just see if I can find some of these photos for you, John. Let's see if we can hopefully see it on the screen now. You can see some of our PowerPoint, and there's one of Mount Archer that you can see. Let's see if that works quite nicely. There we go.
Yep, that's good. And so what we've got is, you look at the top and you'll see some reddish stuff up there.
There's another picture there, look.
The picture there. And this is even underneath the snow and those snowy mountains. And right up the top of Tasmania, you'll find this red layer, and the red only forms when you get enough water to fill the ground so that the water level will rise to the top, and it will bring the soluble minerals like iron with it. Right, now iron normally will just dissolve in water. It's fairly soluble, as some of the minerals you find in the rocks, but as soon as it gets to the air, it forms iron oxide, which is insoluble. Right, so the iron compounds will dissolve in water, but the iron oxide will fall out, and the iron oxide, you know, is rust. Right,
yeah,
it takes reddish color, and it goes up and down over the years, and provided the ground is always wet. And notice that this is a pretty scrubby, bushy area there. It's not a jungle where there's a rainforest at all anymore. So the climate has changed. So I became very aware, particularly as I travel all over Australia, as I deal with the rocks and fossils in geology, that the climate had changed long before Europeans even arrived in Australia.
Yeah. So let me just get what you're saying is right here. Just make sure it's clear in our head. Whenever you find evidence of red soils, this lateralization, what you're saying is that at some point in the past, it has been warm and it's been wet in order to get that sort of fluctuation and that sort of rusty soil, basically. It's you could almost call it a fossil soil, a sort of a record of the climate in the past recorded in the soil. Is that right?
It's certainly right. And the coldest place I've personally seen it is under the snow in the Antarctic. Right? I believe you've got a similar experience in Iceland.
We have, actually. Let me see if I can get some pictures just up here. Hopefully you can see this on the screen. So we've got Iceland climate past. You can see the black rocks on the top. Those black rocks are basalt. It's a lava flow that has happened, and it's sort of buried. Can you see the red rock underneath there as well? Look at another close-up picture. There's the volcanic rocks. There's the red fossil soil, the lateralization, the same stuff that we find down there in Australia, John. In fact, there's plenty of it about. You can sort of see meter scale there with our red fossil soil. Wonderful stuff, wonderful lateralization there. And it really does actually go to show that at some point in the past, Iceland has been warm and it's been wet. In fact, it wasn't just the red fossil soil, because we were actually driving when we discovered the red fossil soil. We were driving up to the West Fjords, which are sort of on the top west part of Iceland, and we were going there to actually try and to discover some fossils, because we'd heard there were some fossils about. We wanted to go and try and find some fossils, and I had to shout and make my wife jump out of her skin at the sight of this red rock that I wanted to get out and actually investigate. But let me see if I can just get some pictures up here for you, because we've actually found, there we go, some wonderful fossil plants. These are actually in a museum. They specially opened the museum just for us. We were the only visitors on the very cold and wet day, and we bumped into these people, and we said, oh, we were looking for these fossils, we want to find these fossils. And they said, oh, it's actually on my farm, and there's a small museum around here in this little sort of shed cabin thing. I'll open up for you and you can come around and have a look. And these were some of the things that are on display in there. And I wonder if any of our viewers can actually recognize any of these fossils, any of these plant fossils, because in particular, I mean, John, how well do you know your plants? Do you know what kind of leaf this could be?
Well, basically, because my screen view is about 1 inch by 1 inch.
Right. Fair enough. Well, I'll tell you, for those viewers who don't know, this is a hornbeam. I don't know if you know the plant hornbeam, John. You probably know this one, the birch, the Vetula pendula, or the birch. These are common plants that you sort of find growing around warmer climates. And what's really interesting, this is a sign which is on the wall of the museum where we went and explored. And I don't know if we can you might just about be able to see this if you're watching this on a big screen, but it talks about what was the climate like here. And it says most tree species making up Icelandic fossil forests are now extinct, but their closest relatives now thrive at more southern latitudes in tropical and subtropical coniferous forests. In fact, what they've actually stated here, and this is taken straight off of the museum's wall, going on the evidence like the red fossil soils, going on the evidence like the plant fossils and the pollen fossil records, it suggests an average temperature of up to 15 degrees centigrade. So, I mean, that's quite a lot warmer than the kind of stuff that we were experiencing in Iceland when we traveled there. But like you say, John, this stuff has been found all over the world, including underneath Antarctica. So yes, we can say that at one point in Earth's history, Iceland was very warm.
You could say that basically across the globe, because you've got, if you look at the ice at the moment, someone just wrote in and said, what about the Ice Age? Well, the ice is still here in Canada, still here in some parts of Russia, still here in Antarctica, still here in the Arctic, right? But it's the last thing that's happened. Underneath that is soils that are red, right? And with tropical to subtropical plants, and this is global. So the ice is the last thing, and it's only affected part of the Earth. There's no evidence it's been all over the planet. But when you go to Iceland, there's even buildings and that are left over from the Vikings that match this history, both there, and you filmed some in England too, I believe, that match this the two climates together, even though they're sort of thousands of kilometers apart.
Yeah, we absolutely did. Let me just bring up another chart for our viewers. Hopefully they can see this on the screen here. It's called Central England Temperature Since 900 AD from Historical Records. This is the chart which I know you use a lot, John. Its source is actually from the University of Leeds, even though they've sort of hidden away the graph now from what we can find. This was taken from the University of Leeds a little while back. And one thing you can notice is, well, this is over the last 900 years. We actually have temperature records going back a lot further than that, because the Romans were here and they were making historical records 2,000 years ago. And even beyond that, we've got lots of peat bogs, we've got lots of soil experiments which you can get pollen out of and stuff, and you can work out a very, very long and comprehensive history of climate. But you notice one interesting thing here. You've got a temperature which suddenly shoots up to above 10 degrees, an average of 10 degrees Celsius, and then it plunges down very, 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 very cold, and it's not actually yet as warm as it was during that warm period, which we now know of as the medieval warm period. And this is something which we explore in our new documentary, Fire and Ice, because just like in the UK, where we have these wonderful records, we also have wonderful records from Iceland. In fact, we actually took all of the evidence that we discovered both during our trip and also after our trip, when we were going through the scientific papers and researching them and digging them up, and actually trying to put together a map of climate from a biblical perspective. Of course, a biblical perspective, if you take the Bible as real history, as I know you do, John, and I do, and everybody at Creation Research does, you get to an age of the Earth of around 6,000 to 7,000 years old. You have Noah's flood happening about 4,600 years ago or so. And let me just put this up on the screen. This is what we actually came up with: Iceland's climate history, a biblical perspective. What you find is, way back just after Noah's flood, you have a nice warm climate of around 15 to 16 degrees centigrade, and then it plummets in temperature, getting really cold in what we know as the Ice Age. Then it warms up again, and then we began to move away from the red fossil soil evidence, away from the plant evidence, away from the sort of the geological evidence, and we start moving into historical records, where we find the Roman warm period, which is this sort of warm air period round here. It gets cold again, it then warms up again for when the Vikings arrived here, which we call the medieval warm period in this segment. It's cold again, and now it's warming up. And you notice the average temperature at the moment, which is around 3.5 degrees centigrade, is still not as warm as when the Vikings arrived, and it's nowhere near as warm as when those plants and fossils were actually being formed. So it's interesting when you start to sort of dig down into the evidence, the kind of stuff that you can find out.
Can I just throw in something there, Joseph, which is a key factor? I was invited to go to Iceland, and I said to my host, I said, "Why did you blokes settle in such a crazy place where everything's covered in ice?"
I'm sure he took that well.
Yeah, he said there wasn't any ice here when we arrived. And besides, it's you English who call it Iceland. He thought I was English, right? But he said we didn't call it Iceland. We called it Isus land, Jesus land, because it was settled by the first Christian Vikings, and the climate enabled them to travel. Go back to the times of Paul and the apostles, etc., and you find the same thing. For a short period just before Jesus' life, the climate had evened out, right? And then for the Roman Empire, the climate was magnificent. Both the Roman records and the biblical records, like how many snowstorms are mentioned in your New Testament? Answer, none, right? And that one storm only. And it meant that the Romans could build roads everywhere, unhindered by bad weather, and that prepared the way for the gospel to go throughout the world. So climate, gospel, God's control, all of this you touch on in your brand new documentary, don't you?
Yeah, we go through all of that. We don't just look at, obviously, Iceland's history, because it's interesting you mention this about the Vikings. The Vikings sort of adopted their Christianity not long after they'd sort of been settled in Iceland. But what's interesting, if you go before then, there's a lot of evidence which is now starting to be recognized that even before the Vikings reached Iceland, it was settled by Celtic monks traveling from Ireland and from Scotland. Sort of the old sort of traditional sort of hermit kind of view, taking Christianity and trying to find somewhere to settle and study God's word. So there's lots of interesting connections that you find to Jesus land, or to this sort of what we now call Iceland, both from a pagan perspective as well as from a Christian perspective. And they certainly adopted Christianity very, very early on, actually much earlier than a lot of the Vikings from around sort of the UK place. So we don't, in the documentary, we sort of start off, it's actually a 3-part documentary, by the way. It's an hour and a half in length. It's split into 3 parts. Our first part looks at the sort of the geology of the island. So we look at the basalt, we look at the great big geysers and the volcanoes and all the fun stuff. Then we sort of start to look into the issue of climate. Where is this agenda coming from? What is the climate like in Iceland now? What are some of the evidence? So we go and dig up some fossils. We go and look at the red fossil soils. We start to look at the climate from the record of the Vikings living there, and how they were growing grain and stuff that you can't really grow on the island anymore, except for in a very few select places where it's warmed sort of by the underground hot springs. And then finally, and I think this is perhaps the most important part of our sort of documentary, in part 3, it's called A Biblical Perspective, where we don't just begin to tie up Iceland with also the climate records in the UK. We also actually come back to the UK and we look at an abandoned medieval village, which we both discovered and went exploring a few years back, didn't we? And we sort of tie it in with climate change as well. And we really do get across that really important biblical perspective. Do you want to comment on that biblical perspective? Because I think that's really the most important point here.
It really is. I mean, not only do we throw in stuff about Australian red soil, and you get to see my gorgeous or ugly face, depending on your perspective, but we remind you that climate has gone on for ages, and we've got history for ages. And when you throw the biblical history in, you have Adam and Eve right up to Noah with almost no climate change. It's very, very regular, cool, warm. And then the first climate change happens, which is not caused by gasoline or excess industrial pollution. It's God's judgment on man at Noah's day. Yeah. And then after the flood, God steps in and he says to Noah, from now till the end of the world. Did you hear that, Mr. Johnson? Did you hear that, President Biden? There's no point in ringing young Australians who are 14 to give you advice on climate change, Joe Biden, because they have no experience of climate at all, but God has. And he told Noah that you would have these hot and cold, wet and dry, all of these things till the end of the world. And that's really what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
You see ice mentioned in the book of Job, none before that. Then by the time you get to Jesus, there's no ice again. Then by the time you get to the New Testament days, it's cool, it can be cold, but there's no evidence of ice until the 800s. Then it goes again, then it comes again in a big way, not long after the Vikings got there. And we put it in a whole big biblical perspective with one simple point. God is the one who controls climate and uses it to bless you or to judge you. Listen carefully, all you Trumps and Bidens and politicians out there. It's not just a man's enterprise.
No, that's great. And we obviously touch on that and a lot more in our final part of our climate documentary. We also bring in King Jehoshaphat and the Book of Kings and God's power over the climate there as well. And it's all done with beautiful backdrop scenery while we're standing on a glacier. So it's well worth the watch. Well, we've actually been going, John, believe it or not, for nearly half an hour now. It's about 25 minutes. So I think we'll begin to wrap up. It's always great when we get to do this exciting stuff. And I think we must have to do another one of these again, if we can get the technology working. we had a bit of fun with the technology, John appearing upside down, and I know you're Australian, but you know, we really prefer you the right way up. So pray for the technology, those who are watching and are supporting us. But before we close, let's just tell people if they would like to watch the climate documentary Fire and Ice, exploring real history, that being the real history of climate, how they would actually do that. Because we actually have DVDs in production. Very, very shortly, we will have DVDs available to be shipped out in the UK and in Australia. And if there's the demand for them, I'm sure we could make their way across to the USA as well. But what we've actually done is, well, John, you've been doing this work for a long time now, and you've been producing VHS tapes since sort of the 80s, haven't you? So we've been sort of at the forefront of a lot of, media products for a while now, with VHS tapes and CDs and DVDs and downloadable MP4s. But what we've gone ahead and done now is actually create a new streaming service to actually be able to show you how you can stream on any device without having to download anything at all, and we've had all of our content on there. So just give me a second. Let me see if I can actually, there we go. Let's see if I can actually screen share here. It'll look a bit funky for a moment because there'll be all of us up on the same screen. There we go. Let's go to here now. Okay, hopefully you should be able to see that. John, can you just give me a shout if you can see that?
I can see that. I can see two slides at once, and again only on a couple of inches by a couple of inches.
That's all right, lovely. So long as you can see the screen. This is Creation Research Live, creationresearchlive.com. If you go to it, it's our new streaming service. So on here we've not just got all of our videos that Creation Research has produced all over the years, and our new documentaries and the such, but it gives you a nice way of streaming it. It also has all of our free content as well. You can see our free content over here, and it's got Creation Research Unplugged, which you can actually go on and watch yourself. There it is there. All of our last series is up there, including the last episode, episode 10. We've got a series 2, which is coming soon, we're really looking forward to that. Let's just turn that off for the second. But in particular, what we have is all of our DVDs, all of our videos ready for you to actually stream right now. So you can see them all on there, and there's special deals. You can find out more about how it works in the How It Works section. You can see the deals, and even unlimited subscription is on there. But for now, we've got Fire and Ice over here. Look, all you simply do is click on Buy It Now. You can find your information about your video that you want to watch. You just add it to your cart. When you go to My Cart, there it is. You simply agree to the terms and conditions, check out with PayPal, and then what will actually happen is you will be sent an email with a one-time link. So when you click on that link, you get to go through and watch the video. It's as simple as that. It is a one-time link though, so make sure when you click on that link, you're actually ready to watch it, because it will only give you access to that video once. We've had plenty of people use it already. You can find not just Fire and Ice on there, you can actually find all of our different DVDs that we've done over the years, including the Darwin trilogy, really good documentaries, good lectures, good debates. This is a brand new series as well by John, How to Recognize Creation, a 3-part series. Really great stuff on there there as well, and you can watch all of these, get the deals, stream them, and as well as watch all of our free content and the upcoming Creation Research Live Series 2 as well. So it's nice and simple. creationresearchlive.com is the place to go. And if you want the MP4 or you want the DVD, both of those will be available very soon from creationresearch.net. So do check out there as well. Well, I think that's been a fairly productive run. We've had quite a lot of people watching as well, John. I'll just run down and see if there's any comments before we go and say goodbye. George Purchases is watching. We've got Rachel Mara's watching from Scotland. We've got Brother Joseph, congratulations on your recent marriage. I'm sure Grandpa John wants 4 to 12 grandchildren. So we've got lots of people watching. George Bond is watching. Hi, George. It's good to see you again. Yeah, the DVD will be available very, very soon. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for watching. We've reached the half-an-hour mark, so I think we're going to sign off now. But goodbye, John. God bless. Any final words from you?
No, it's just I've got to start again with George in the USA in about an hour's time or so. So we better get up and run for the next.
Get running for the next one. All right, we must do this again, John, and discuss some more stuff as we go forward. So catch you later, buddy. It's good to speak to you. Bye-bye.